Hello, everyone. We are back again, breaking down the slate for you. I got Eric Mack here. How's it going, Eric?
I'm doing good. I'm excited, for this week's slate. There's a lot of little things that I like on the in the breakdown of these this week's games. And coming off of last week where I won some money, I'm anticipating another good week.
Well, you know what, Eric?
Keep
I'm
the
happy to
energy
hear.
positive.
I'm happy to hear that from your standpoint. But I was heading into last week saying, "Man, I don't know," and it went about as you'd say, and I don't know would go for me. Um, I feel a lot better about this week, though. I feel like things are a lot more organized. Not as much chaos with the injuries as last week. I think things are. I mean, we'll look back and say probably not, but I feel right now things are a little more straightforward for me. So, I mean, we can get into it. Dolphins Bengals obviously happened last night. What did you think of that game? Did it kind of go as you planned?
Yeah, I'm kind of disappointed I wasn't more bullish on the Bengals and AJ Green. After what Terrell Pryor did to that Dolphins secondary, I was expecting Green to have a good week, but I should have put some more plays into it to back it up. Great day for AJ Green. The Bengals playing at home. They're a far superior organization to the Dolphins right now. So be wary of the Dolphins going forward.
I think that's what we saw against good defenses. I mean, we can still trust Jarvis Landry, but they just have no run game, and it's just that's a tough battle for them for sure.
Yeah. Tannehill. I'm not sure Tannehill's got the long-term juice at quarterback either.
No, I know. It kind of looks like yeah, it's ugly. So it's looking like our first game here, London, 9:30, Colts versus Jags. You gonna be up for this one, Eric?
Yeah, I'm always up, especially for football. Now, this game is one of my more exciting games on the board. I like both teams because of what the defenses have permitted. And the last time the Jags played the Colts, Blake Bortles went off for 3 passing touchdowns. He rushed for another. And that was a game in which Andrew Luck wasn't playing. So with Andrew Luck in the game, pushing the pace on that side, Bortles, kind of off to a disappointing start relative to the 35 touchdown passer he was a year ago. I think Allen Robinson and Bortles are a good stack. And I like the Colts with Luck and Hilton. Hilton went off last week with Dante Moncrief out. So those two are going to be high-volume guys along with Bortles and Robinson on the other side. In fact, if you like Allen Hurns, he went for 7-1-11-1 against the Colts last year. And Julius Thomas has 5 TDs in his past 3 games against the Colts. So there's stacks on both sides. I know this game isn't included in the big millionaire maker type games, but I like this game. If you're playing the Sunday morning slate, in fact, you should find on FanDuel specifically very good overlay in this game because people actually have to click to get to including this game. And so you'll get some contests with some pretty good overlay. And obviously in daily fantasy terms, we love the overlay.
That's super underrated fact that you just threw out there. In terms of the tournaments, everyone wants to play the main slates, but the real, if you're looking for more of an advantage, you play those smaller slates. It's a little more efficient in terms of who you roster. And yeah, as you mentioned, I like that call quite a bit. In terms of this game, I think you're right. Hilton. It looks like Philip Dorsett's even questionable. That just came out today. I mean, it's just going to be Hilton. I mean, he likes Jack Doyle and Dwayne Allen, but Hilton's the guy. Didn't even have a good matchup last week and still went off for a monster, total there. I agree with Bortles and Robinson. And I mean, just in general, this game, it's just two teams where if one gets down, they're going to be coming back in the fourth quarter anyway. So I actually feel like I like the floor of the players in this game.
Absolutely. It's a good cash game, good GPP. There's a lot to love. And if you're looking at either of the running games, I go with Chris Ivory against the Colts defensive front. They've given up the third most points to fantasy backs, including 6 touchdowns. Only the Saints have given up more touchdowns to backs to date. And Ivory is far cheaper than Yeldon, so you might love that. And Ivory, the last time he went to London, he rushed for a career-high 166 yards and a touchdown. So if anybody's believing the I just feel comfortable here theory, Ivory is a solid play in a solid matchup.
I like it. There we go. Yeah, and I mean, I was a Yeldon guy coming into the year. I think even I want to see more Ivory at this stage. It's getting ugly out there for Yeldon. I still have some hope, but yeah, I think Ivory, as you mentioned, the cash value play for sure.
I'm going to nickname their running backs Ebony and Ivory.
There you go. There you go. I like it. So if you don't want to get up for that game, we'll start with some of the main slates here. Titans and Texans. J.J. Watt out for the year. I was really looking at the Texans here. I still think I am just because the Titans are that bad. But what are you looking at this matchup here?
Well, there is something to be said for the Texans defense minus J.J. Watt. The Texans dominated both meetings last season. And if you expect that to hold up again, I know Mariota can change the game a little bit. But if you expect the Texans to dominate, particularly at home, you might want to go with a little sleeper stack of Texans, starting with their defense. You got to consider DeAndre Hopkins. He's had pretty good numbers in the past meetings. In fact, the past 3 games, he has 24 catches for 449 yards and 3 touchdowns. And that included a game in which he went 9 for 238 and 2. So getting a little bit more comfortable with the quarterback there. You can love a Texans stack against the Titans, and the Titans have given up a 100-yard receiver in each of the first 3 games. I don't love the matchup for Lamar Miller. The Titans have been very good against running backs. They've held starting running backs under 40 yards in each of the 3 games. So if you're loving Texans, you're loving Hopkins, and the defense.
Yeah, and I think Hopkins is the main takeaway from this game. I do think Will Fuller's an interesting guy in tournaments, not too expensive at this stage. And Lamar Miller's the guy that I really want to talk about. I agree it's not a perfect matchup, and he hasn't, they haven't really figured it out with him yet. They've been giving it to him a bunch, but it hasn't really been working. He's definitely not a cash game guy. He's still expensive around some of the more premium backs that have been showing more upside. I do think there's a little contrarian in me that says maybe this is, the week against the bad Titans team. But as you mentioned, I think for the most part, unless you're doing, just to be contrarian, I think you're probably avoiding Miller again this week.
Yeah, his price is up there for what he is so far. That Titans defensive front doesn't get enough credit for what it has done against some pretty decent backs.
Yep. And as far as Mariota, I mean, I'm thinking at some point these teams are going to just try to stop DeMarco Murray, right? I mean,
yeah, load the box.
Teams have had no problem stopping the Titans, but I wonder when the game plans start to change, just solely focus on Murray, I wonder if that'll just make the offense even worse. But,
Garrett Blount did pound the Texans for 105 yards and 2 touchdowns in the last meeting, but I don't think the Texans are at home are going to play the same way as they did on the road in primetime against the Pats. So fading Murray, fading the Titans, and if you do anything in this game, maybe you go a little Texans heavy.
Agreed. Yeah, definitely for sure. Next game here. So in DFS, sometimes we have to, throw our opinions of real football aside. Mm-hmm. Browns versus Redskins. I want to get your take on this game before I kind of throw my takes in. What are you thinking here?
Well, the Redskins defense obviously is the most popular play in fantasy. They're the most added player in season long, and they're going to be very popular in terms of their price against the Browns. At home is a strong 7-point favorite. There's a lot of reasons to love the Redskins. I think in terms of, following the sheep on their defense, it might not be a way to go in GPPs, maybe more of a cash game thing to do. But you can love the Redskins here and stack Cousins against the Browns team that hasn't been great. They've been the second worst against fantasy wide receivers, and Joe Hayden got a groin injury. He's hobbled, and even if he plays, is he going to be 100%? And they've given up more than an average of 7 receptions to tight ends. So you can love Kirk Cousins, Deshaun Jackson, Jordan Reed, Redskins defense, just about anything you can love on the Redskins here. And the Brown side, Isaiah Crowell is not bad. He did have a 85-yard touchdown, which he went at a max speed of 21.97 miles per hour. I would guess that's fast. I mean, I can't ride a bike that fast, I guess. So Crowell's got some juice, and the Redskins have been the second worst team in fantasy against running backs, allowing a league-high 6 rushing TDs, 2 in each of the first 3 games. So if you play anything, it's Crowell. And poor Browns. They lose their quarterbacks. They lose Corey Coleman, and now they got to say goodbye to Josh Gordon. Sad state of affairs for the Browns organization, which has been for decades.
And I love Hugh Jackson. I think he's a great coach, but this is tough for anyone to figure out right now. I was listening to some of the press conferences, and he's just saying we're trying to win here. We're going to keep going. We're going to work with our guys. And I'm like, I love you, Hugh, but not this year, my man.
You don't know what you're talking about.
The Redskins, I mean, yeah, you mentioned it. Kirk Cousins, Deshaun Jackson, Jordan Reed, Redskins defense. I think all systems go with all 4 of those. I mean, you can look at Jamison Crowder, but I'm really looking at Jordan Reed and Deshaun Jackson. I think Reed's going to be a nice pay-up option at tight end this week. And yeah, Cousins hasn't been good this year, but this matchup's too good. I got to go with it. Next one here, Seahawks and Jets. What do you got for me?
Oh, you really have to be a football junkie to love this one. Not only are both defenses fairly tough, the Seahawks are number 1 against fantasy quarterbacks and wide receivers. The Jets are number 4 against fantasy running backs, but also neither offense is really promising much in this game. The Seahawks going across the coast for a 1:00 game. I know they're coming off that huge performance. And last week, remember, I went with that strategy of just finding the biggest favorite, home favorite, and just loading up on them. Christine Michael, Doug Baldwin, Jimmy Graham, Russell Wilson all came through to earn some money for us. I don't see that group necessarily lighting it up against the Jets on the road. And I think this game will be played a bit slower with the Jets offense banged up. Decker might not play. Brandon Marshall's got a knee and a foot issue. Matt Forte's got a knee issue. They're all playing, if they play at something far less than 100%, and at their age, you probably should expect they'll never be at 100%. So if you're playing anything, it's the Seahawks defense against the Jets team that's throwing a league-high 7 interceptions. And they've given up league high 3 defensive scores. I just don't love this game in any aspects, truly.
So I think you gave everyone a pretty good strategy, just generally speaking, last week. And the other part of that was all those guys were super low owned. And I mean, if you're looking to be contrarian in the tournament, and you don't, like last week was a perfect example with Doug Baldwin. I mean, you got a super deal on a really good player with low ownership in like a perfect situation. So
yeah, and that was a function of the Seahawks offense just getting blanked at the LA Rams. And you follow the Vegas numbers. Those Vegas people are rich and smart, okay? And you don't expect, this Seahawks offense sucks, blah, 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 blah. But you know what? Vegas said this is going to be a blowout in the Seahawks' favor. And so you got to take their primary guys. And it paid off.
Yeah, and again, I think generally speaking, people look at lines and then one will be way off, and they'll be like, Vegas knows. Vegas knows these guys are incredible. I mean, super smart. And yeah, I tend to agree. I wasn't on that, but I think that's a lesson going forward. Even if you don't necessarily like the matchup, teams in really good, Vegas total situations, certainly something to pay attention to.
And we got a few more of these on the slate that, you're going to say, why this team? They just stunk last week. And it'll be like, well, you know what? Look at the Vegas numbers. There's going to be production.
Right. So anyway, for this game, yeah, it's going to be a tough one. Both good run defenses. For the most part, I might be, looking away from this one. Next up here, the last week of Tom Brady-less Patriots. And I mean, they are a steamroller. I just don't even want to, I don't want to deal with any of these teams playing against them right now. Right. 6-point favorites. I think we're looking at LeGarrette Blount again this week.
Well, it's another situation where you got the big home favorite, and their offensive pieces aren't necessarily premium guys because Rob Gronkowski's got the hamstring issue, and it completely plagued him, and he produced zilch in that Thursday night game. You get Bill Belichick with extra time to prepare for a Bills team coming off a huge victory against the Cardinals. Few could have expected that. And you got your quarterback issues. You're not sure if Garoppolo will play. I tend to believe he will. But you could load up on your Pats in this one, just not Gronkowski. I like Julian Edelman. The Bills haven't been great against opposing receivers. They've given up a league-high 53 receptions and a league-high 780 yards to opposing receivers. So this could be one of those 10 receptions for 120-yard games for Edelman, who, it didn't happen last week, but maybe with Garoppolo and Brissett both banged up, maybe Edelman chips in some passing numbers this week. And, the Bills front isn't bad, so you can like LeGarrette Blount against it. And, with the game expected to go in favor of the Pats the way it is, load up on the Pats defense. They're one of the most underrated units in football, and it plays far better at home, particularly in division games. Jamie Collins had 3.5 sacks against the Bills last year, and Jabal Sheard had 2 sacks last week. So there could be good numbers for the Pats picking off the Bills at home.
And so 2 to 3 years ago, the Bills' run defense was incredible. Mm-hmm. And I've kind of held that reputation with me for a long time. But when you really start to look at it over the last, going back to last year, they've been okay. They've been above average, but they haven't been, the dominant team that they were. So I think we can look at Blount again this week, especially with the steamroller Patriots offense so far. And as you mentioned, I think Edelman's a sneaky guy this week. With that big home favorite, we don't know what the quarterback situation is like, but maybe like Doug Baldwin last week, we just kind of trust Edelman. We'll figure it out,
To be the guy in the big spread. Now, when you were talking about the Bills front, they gave up 30 carries for 100 yards and 3 touchdowns to Matt Forte, and then David Johnson, even at a blowout loss, went 19 for 83 and 2 touchdowns. So Blount should get some good numbers, particularly if this game stays in favor of the Pats as we expect.
Definitely. Next one here, an exciting one. Panthers versus the Falcons. Cam Newton bounce back? ?
Well, the thing with this game is the Las Vegas total is 50, and they love this game. And like I said, they tend to be right. But I'm not real in love with this game. I think the Falcons are coming off a huge Monday night performance, so there could be a little bit of a letdown against a very good Panthers defense that's coming off a very disappointing home loss to the Vikings. No one could have saw that coming. I don't think Devonta Freeman and Tevin Coleman are going to find the go as easy against the Panthers front as they did against the Saints. C.J. Anderson did go for 92 yards and a touchdown and had some good pass receiving numbers against the Panthers, but neither the Vikings nor the 49ers, 2 run-heavy teams, could penetrate the Panthers defense. So I don't think the Falcons backs will. So you fade Freeman and Coleman coming off their big week. I think the easiest cash game play is Julio Jones. He's, a dud on Monday night, 1 catch for 16 yards. But the Panthers are very good against fantasy receivers, so maybe there's an opportunity to get them at a lower ownership than you usually might. Matt Ryan is hot. the Falcons can throw the ball. I think Jones had 9 catches for 178 yards and a touchdown in the pass meeting. And while the Panthers have great numbers against quarterbacks, they're second to just the Seahawks. They've played some awful quarterbacks. Matt Ryan is not that. So Julio Jones is my comeback player of the week here.
I love that call, and that was going to be my call. If you didn't have it, in prime time, just killing people's DFS lineups. He comes back here, and Matt Ryan, has had some really easy matchups and has been able to rely on his secondary pieces a lot. I think this is a game where he's going to need Julio. He's going to need that superstar receiver to throw it up to. Mohamed Sanu's a little dinged up again. So, I love that call. I think he's a great pay-up option in tournaments this week. Josh Norman no longer there, so I think that's a really good call.
The Panthers' corners have struggled against physical-type receivers, hence the huge numbers for Jones last year against the Panthers. Mm-hmm. And then if you're looking on the Panthers' offensive side, the Falcons have been the worst team in fantasy against quarterbacks, second worst against tight ends. So Cam Newton, Greg Olsen's stack looks good, and I like Calvin Martin. Oh, what year am I in? Calvin Benjamin in that stack if you're going with the trio of Panthers. But again, I don't love this game as much as the Vegas total of 50 does.
Yeah, I like Cam. I think he's a cash game guy if you want to pay up at quarterback. But yeah, as you mentioned, the stack with Olsen, stack with Kelvin, I'm cool with all those guys. But yeah, could be an interesting matchup. I like it. Falcons finally have a shot here.
It'll be an interesting game. I'm just not sure it's going to be as loose as you might expect.
Mm-hmm. Raiders, Ravens, 2 R teams. Pretty solid total.
That was me catching some Z's for the Raiders. You go back to the East Coast, play a 1:00 game. That's not easy for a West Coast team to keep coming back and forth to the East Coast. They played at the Saints. I think it was at the Titans, and now at the Ravens. This got to wear on them. So I think the Raiders offense, which has some pretty good pieces in terms of Michael Crabtree, Amari Cooper, Latavius Murray. I don't love them at the Ravens defense, which was very good last week against the Jaguars. This game I know was loose in Oakland and went 37-33 in favor of I believe at the Ravens with Joe Flacco going nuts. But I'm not loving either side of this. I think this game's going to play under the number. And if you're looking for a cash game play, it's Latavius Murray.
Agreed. Yeah, I think this Ravens defense is actually pretty good. And we kind of looked to last year and they were horrible and injured, but they have some pretty good players on that defense. And while the Raiders have done well so far, they beat up on the Saints and the Falcons. So this is a little different game here. I think the Ravens are going to slow the pace down. Even though they are passing more, they do tend to throw a lot of, shorter passes. So I think that's what we're kind of looking at in terms of game flow. Obviously, Amari Cooper's always in play, but I tend to agree. This game isn't quite as appealing as you'd like for fantasy purposes.
And you like Amari Cooper, but I think Crabtree's value versus Cooper's price is a bit better. Crabtree's had less receiving yards, but he's had more catches, and he's the one that catches the ball in the end zone thus far for the Raiders on 2-point conversions and in terms of one-on-one matchup jump ball type things. So I'm going, if I go with anything, Crabtree and maybe a Latavius Murray play.
That's certainly a good point. Crabtree has been the guy they sort of throw those fades to. So certainly something to keep in mind if you're a Cooper guy, that just because he's the best receiver doesn't mean he's going to get the goal line work.
Yeah, and there'll be production for both of them in more wide open games. But Cooper hasn't had a touchdown yet, and I think there'll be far better weeks to load up on Cooper.
Certainly. Next game here is one that I'm embarrassingly excited about. I don't want to admit it, but I am. Lions-Bears. on both sites, I think there's some salaries to exploit with the Bears, and obviously you love this Lions, offense, especially with what they're doing against this just hobbled. It's week 4, and they're just limping around,
Yeah. Now, the public has moved this line at 2 full points. So usually when that happens, the public's moving the line. Las Vegas is saying, well, this number is going to play here. And the public's going, no, this will be a wide open crazy game. Well, Vegas is rich for very good reasons. So they were probably closer to being correct at a 46 point total than the 48 that it's at now. So I'm going to fade this game to get loose. I do like Zach Miller, what he did last week with Brian Hoyer, 8 catches, 78 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And the Lions have given up the most fantasy points to tight ends to date. So you could expect Zach Miller to be in a lot of GPP lineups. And I'm slotting him in mine, following the sheep even. Because the value is just too good there. And, and if it does get loose, Matthew Stafford does have a big game. They're going to throw. They're going to do it with Zach Miller. I'm not completely trustworthy of Alshon Jeffrey with Brian Hoyer at this point. I'm assuming Cutler's out again, and the running back Jermaine Langford's out. So a lot of people are going to like the value of Jordan Howard as a guy who's priced as a backup and will get the start. But again, I'm still thinking the Vegas number is better than what the public's moved it to.
I think that's fair. However, I'm all over. I'm all over Zach Miller. I mean, so I can agree with you that maybe this game doesn't hit where we want, but I still think Zach Miller, like you mentioned, he's going to be in your lineups. 2,700 on DK. I just can't help but think that's a huge value. And we have a few other tight ends that are maybe values this week, but in terms of, projected target totals, even if he doesn't score a touchdown, if he gets 5 for 60 yards, that's all you really need to hit value at 2,700. So I like that. I look at Kevin White coming off a 14 target game, and I just have to say at like 3,400, I don't necessarily like the play. But I mean, Hoyer's min price, if these guys were priced up 500 more each, it'd be a lot tougher decision. I'm just having a hard time getting away from the mins when I can fit, if I get them in, I can fit Antonio Brown and Hopkins and all the guys you're looking at. Yeah. So I think that's interesting. In terms of the Lions, what are you looking at?
Well, you got Matt Stafford has had 3 consecutive road games with 3 touchdown passes, and he's thrown for 703 yards and 7 TDs in the 2 games against the Bears last year. That's huge production. You can look, therefore, to Marvin Jones, Golden Tate, Anquan Bolden, Eric Ebron, all his viable plays. Again, though, I think this game, is going to be a bit slower paced than the numbers that the public have pushed this to suggest. And something that's not lost on me is Caldwell and Fox are both defensive guys. And defensive coordinators don't tend to like to play wide open games. So when they're facing each other, I think it could be a bit more of a dead game.
Maybe they slow down the pace a little more. I do. So I like Marvin Jones. I wasn't as in on him as some people. This is certainly, this start has certainly changed my mind a bit. Still in a range where I'm willing to pay for him. I think him and Stafford's the solid, stack there. I don't know if I'm worried about Golden Tate, but I wonder what his usage is going to look like with Bolden there now, Yeah.
I mean, it's something to consider. It's just, Stafford's numbers against the Bears are so exciting to people. Maybe that's really what's pushing the number is Stafford against that Bears defense.
Yep. So, generally speaking, I think that's kind of what we're looking at in that game. Broncos, Buccaneers. This one could get ugly, I think.
You mean lopsided ugly?
Yeah.
So if that's the case, you load up on Broncos, right? But I'm still not sold on Jameis Winston. I know he got blown out in Arizona, But he's coming off a home game in which he threw for 400 yards against the Rams defense. I thought was decent. Not obviously Broncos good, but I love the confidence that we can now get in Demaryius Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders. Against a good Cincinnati secondary, Trevor Siemian went off for 312 and 4. Demaryius Thomas went 6-101. Emmanuel Sanders went 9-117 and 2. And both wideouts are playing the Bucs, who have given up the third most points in fantasy receivers to date. So I'm loving the Sanders value there. The Bucs probably are decent against the run, considering what they do against the pass. So that should open things up for Sanders, off the play action, because they're going to pound C.J. Anderson, but the Bucs linebacking core is pretty stout. So I'm thinking good numbers over the top for Sanders, and Demaryius Thomas's price is a bit high for me, but the matchup is there, and if you're going with a Broncos blowout, you got to go with both of them.
Yep, I like that call. I'd say last week I needed that wake-up call. Emmanuel Sanders and Demaryius gave me a call up, and they were like, "Hey, Russ, stop ignoring us." I was like, "I'm sorry." And that was very impressive, especially Siemian's end of the deal. I think we can kind of, trust Emmanuel Sanders at this point at his price range. As you mentioned, Demaryius a little expensive, but for Sanders' sake, I definitely like that call. C.J. Anderson, a great play. And I like the Broncos defense. I think the Buccaneers are going to score just because of how much passing volume they have. Mm-hmm. But I just like the chance of maybe a mistake from Winston along the way, and, all those passing attempts. I think a pick six or something like that, there's like a decent chance at that at least.
So I think from what I'm hearing from you, you're kind of with me. I think the total of 43 after what you saw the Rams and Buccaneers do last week is a bit low. So I think this game will go a bit over, a bit more exciting. I'm not going to play Winston. The Broncos defense held Cam Newton to 194 and 1, Andrew Luck to 197 and 1, and then Andy Dalton, of all quarterbacks, actually cracked the 200 barrier with 206, but without a touchdown. So you can't play Winston. You can't love Mike Evans. But, I think this game could get a little bit over the total, as long as it's not one of those 35-3 blowouts in the Broncos favor.
Mm. Yeah, and again, I'd like the Jameis Winston we're seeing right now is not the evolved version of Jameis Winston. This is like early on. So we see the talent, and that's what I think. We're going to see splash plays, a few mistakes as well. So that's kind of how I see that game going. So I guess we're saying maybe, look at the over there, maybe a little bit.
I played that one.
Rams and Cardinals. It's so tough to look at this matchup because in theory, just matching up on paper, Cardinals should, but I feel like the last few matchups haven't kind of gone that way. So what's your read on this?
So the Cardinals were a huge disappointment at Buffalo, and the Rams were a huge surprise at Tampa. I think it comes back to us this week with the Cardinals. I think a lot of their plays can be stacked. This might be the one like the Seahawks game was last week. These guys aren't really going that well offensively. Let's fade them. But it was a load up on Seahawks. This might be a load up on Cardinals. I know they're 7-point favorite. They're going to lock down and control the game, I think, as they did in their last meeting, which was a 27-3 win in December for the Cardinals. You're fading Todd Gurley in that case, and then you're riding David Johnson. He's a touchdown machine. He ran for 2 touchdowns in a blowout loss last week, and he tallied 99 yards and a touchdown in that last meeting. So if you're stacking Cardinals, you go with Carson Palmer, David Johnson, and then you kind of got a crapshoot at receiver any given week. Larry Fitzgerald, Michael Floyd, John Brown, Jerron Brown, J.J. Nelson, any of these guys can go off. So I kind of toss one of those in, Johnson, Palmer, one of those receivers, and then the Cardinals defense, it's pricey, but it's pretty good bet against a limited Rams offense with that quarterback play you can't be certain of.
Yeah, I like Fitz. obviously, and I like out of those guys, but I think you naming all 5 of the guys there is very like that's what it is. You never know. Like Carson Palmer's got so many options. I think they're going to be able to move the ball, and I like this call. Carson Palmer coming off, that 4 interception on the road game against the Bills, much different situation here. So yeah, I think that's a good call for, maybe this is the Seahawks of last week, stack Palmer, Fitzgerald, and maybe get a little David Johnson in there as well. So definitely like that call.
People might not love what the Cardinals did a week ago, but with them being at home against the Rams, could you see this Rams team win this game and be the number 1 team in the division after this one?
I just envision Tyrann Mathieu staring down Case Keenum and Case Keenum just running off the field and saying, "I quit." That's where that offense is at this stage. Obviously decent last week, but much different situation. Should be a fun one. Saints and Chargers. I guess first, let's talk about Drew Brees and his home road splits. Is that factoring in for you, or are you kind of just going with?
It didn't factor in at the Giants, and I thought that Giants secondary, while improved, was still suspect, and then Brees threw up a dud that game. But this one is in San Diego. I think Drew Brees going back to San Diego, probably at the tail end of his career, this could be a moment for him where he's like, I am going to show this team, this town, and this organization what they gave up with me. So I think Drew Brees does have a much better game here than at least he had against the Giants. The last time the 2 teams met, Brees went for, I think it was 370-4 in the past meeting. And of course, that was in the Dome. But both the Chargers and the Saints struggle to stop people. The Chargers have given up just 5 passing TDs, but they've surrendered the 2nd most passing yards, and they're 4th worst against fantasy quarterbacks. So I'm going with bell cow here, Melvin Gordon. With Danny Woodhead gone now, he's increased his pass receiving. Phillip Rivers loves throwing to the running backs and tight ends. We saw Hunter Henry productive in the absence of Antonio Gates last week. I think all these guys on both sides, and then you go with the Brees side, you got Travis Benjamin. Not on the Brees side, you got Brandon Cooks. Got to check on Snead's availability for injury. And if Snead's not available, you go with Michael Thomas. Kobe Fleener had huge numbers last week, and the Chargers were 6th worst against fantasy tight ends. About the only thing you don't like in this game is the defenses.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And I think we all kind of do a little sigh before we say, hey, maybe it's a Kobe Fleener week, but maybe it's a Kobe Fleener week. I think especially with Snead, if Snead's in, I think a lot of that production goes to him. But, Fleener was pretty good last week. He's always going to have those Fleener moments, but he was pretty good. I like the running backs in this game, as you mentioned already, Mark Ingram and Melvin Gordon. Cooks has a tough matchup, but I think he's a play as well. I think we're looking at, this whole game, like you said, Hunter Henry, another guy on DraftKings that's 2,700 at tight end. Yeah. I'm not counting out a Hunter Henry, Zach Miller, throw one of the tight ends in the flex and see what you can get out of that type of move. But in this game, all you're really worried about is the defenses. Throw everyone out there. We're cool with that for sure. Next game here, Cowboys and 49ers. Oh boy.
That sigh is it's kind of what the public's done. It's dropped this total down a point since it opened. And I think it's because neither offense can you really expect it to be that productive. Des Bryant's dealing with the knee issue that'll probably stifle the expectations on the Cowboys side. And the 49ers defense has given up 100-yard rushers in each of the past 2 road games. But look what they did to Todd Gurley in week 1. They held him to 17 carries for 47 yards. So I think that's a good week to fade Ezekiel Elliott And maybe if you're considering the Cowboys, only go with Winton and or Beasley if Bryant's ruled out. On the 49ers side, the Cowboys are a road favorite, but I think you shouldn't overlook what Carlos Hyde has been doing. He'll get around 25 touches. He's coming off a 103-yard, 2-touchdown performance at Seattle, which is a much tougher run defense than the Cowboys would be playing at San Francisco, where they played very well. The 49ers did in the opener. Hyde rushed for 88 yards and 2 touchdowns, and that could be 100 yards and 2 touchdowns for Hyde. So Hyde and that Melvin Gordon that I already mentioned, those might be my 2 favorite backs this week.
Yeah, and I love that price on DraftKings, 4,200. So, yeah, I mean, I think we have to look at Carlos Hyde at this stage, even if you weren't a fan of him coming into the year.
Yeah.
Last week was strange. I mean, Chip Kelly is the only coach I've ever seen, in garbage time, he's running the ball. It was just crushing that prevent defense. And I mean, if that's the case, Carlos Hyde is so insulated in terms of touches. I don't think, most running backs, we have to worry a little bit about games getting out of hand. I don't know that we do with Hyde anymore. I think he's just going to get his looks either way. So, obviously, I like the talent of Hyde. I think this is a good play, especially with that price. Cowboys defense is nothing to be too worried about. And yeah, as you mentioned, I'm looking at Witten and Beasley. Bryant's probably going to be out there with, I guess, a hairline fracture or whatever. Well, I don't know what's going on with Des Bryant, but whatever. He's probably out.
But just don't play him.
Just don't worry. Just don't worry about him. But yeah, Cole Beasley. And I mean, that's pretty much it for this game for me. I'm not getting too invested. As you mentioned, Elliott, I think this is a week to take off. So
yep.
Yeah.
And I will say with the Carlos Hyde phenomenon that you've seen with Chip Kelly's, a lot of what that spread offense does, and Chip Kelly has been, fast-paced. You think fast-paced, you think a lot of throwing, but Chip Kelly is a run-heavy offensive play caller. Not that he necessarily calls the plays at speed of light, but what the quarterbacks do in those offenses, I'm kind of a part-time high school football coach. They count the box. So when the numbers are more blockers in the box than there are defenders, you check down to a run play. So that could be a function of what you saw with Hyde getting all those carries in garbage time. And it's probably not necessarily going to be this way with the 49ers offense. There's not going to be a lot of defensive backs in the game to try to defend Blaine Gabbert, but Carlos Hyde is going to be a high volume running back.
That's interesting, and that's definitely what I was seeing. It was bizarre, but yeah, I mean that's clearly what it is. They're just if the play fits, they're just gonna audible into that. So certainly something to look at there. As far as the next game we got here, Chiefs and Steelers. Le'Veon Bell's back, folks.
Yeah.
Are we excited?
Yeah, I think you can be. I don't think the Chiefs' run defense is that, weak in any way, shape, or form. But Bell is just that good. The Steelers are playing at home. They're going to be pounding Le'Veon Bell as they said they would. With D'Angelo Williams, as old as he is and as heavily used as he was in those first 3 games, I think you can consider Bell a good bet for 20-plus touches. The Chiefs gave up some big numbers to the Chargers running backs, passing and rushing in week 1. While they've been good against backs since, this is Le'Veon Bell. So if you're playing something in this game, the number is 47. I tend to think it's going to be a little disappointing in terms of total points because the Steelers are at home. But I think Le'Veon Bell is the play. Jamal Charles might return. I don't think you play him against the Steelers front. I figure this Steelers defensive front is going to be one of the better ones against the run when it's all said and done. And Charles is clearly not 100% yet. You should like both Antonio Brown and I think Jeremy Maclin as wide receiver plays in the primetime game. And, Ben Roethlisberger, probably not a great week to use him. The Chiefs defense has been the fourth best in fantasy against quarterbacks through 3 games.
Macklin is such a sneaky play, and I love it because it's all the wide receiver ownership is going to be on Antonio Brown in that game. I don't think people are really going to be on Macklin, and he matches up against that defense really well. Last week it was Travis Kelce. I think this is a Macklin week. As far as Jamal Charles goes, I think we just wait this one out, see a few games, even if he is back, and then kind of, evaluate from there. But Le'Veon Bell, Antonio Brown, and log out here, right?
Yeah, I think though, while I am a little cautious on the total of this game, the total production in this game, it is far superior, and this is a good segue for you, far superior to that Monday night one. I don't like that Monday night one at all for daily fantasy purposes.
So imagine that the analyst of the show instead of the co-host doing the segues. I like it. All right, so we're transitioning here to the Giants and Vikings. 43 over under. Vikings favored by 5. I mean, what are you looking at this game? Two actually. I mean, Vikings defense is clearly really good, but I think even the Giants, showing a little life on the defensive side.
Yeah, that performance last week against the Redskins was a bit disappointing. So you got to love that Vikings defense. They've been the number 1 scoring fantasy defense. And the Giants have Eli Manning. He's kind of error prone. They're tied for the league lead with 4 fumbles lost. The Vikings have registered, defensive points all over the place. They've recovered 4 fumbles. They got 5 picks. They've sacked the quarterback a league high 15 times. They've scored 2 defensive touchdowns, a return touchdown, and they picked up a safety. So there's a lot of reasons to love the Vikings defense and fade Eli Manning and Odell Beckham. Odell Beckham, I know it's prime time and all, but he hasn't done much of anything. And that Vikings defense, Cam Newton couldn't do damage against them, and that was Cam Newton at home. And Aaron Rodgers in prime time just went 2-13-1, and Eli Manning hasn't even thrown a touchdown pass to Odell Beckham yet. So I think there's a lot of reasons to love the Vikings defense, a lot of reasons to dislike a lot of the Giants offense. I know Orleans Darkwa is a popular play because he's going to be starting for Rashad Jennings' thumb issue, but and he's priced as a backup. But the Vikings have been number 3 in fantasy against rushing yards for running backs, and they're one of just 3 teams to yet allow a rushing touchdown to a fantasy running back. So I'm fading all my Giants, and if I play anything, it's the Vikings defense.
So, and I think what we're getting with a little hindsight here is that, after the Packers lost to the Vikings, it was like Aaron Rodgers apocalypse week. I think after the Cam Newton at home thing, I don't think we were looking at that the right way. I think it was more, wow, this Vikings defense is tremendous. So I think this could be a really tough matchup for the Giants. As you mentioned, Odell Beckham kind of been, the prominent player, but the touchdowns have been going to Sterling Shepard and the other guys in that offense. So kind of annoying there. I think the Giants are tough, and you might play the Vikings defense this week. As far as Stephon Diggs, are you looking at him this week?
I don't love it because, the Giants' Janoris Jenkins is probably going to shadow him. If I'm looking at anything for the Vikings passing game, it's probably Kyle Rudolph against the Giants' young and raw safeties. So Rudolph off of play action in the red zone, and Matt Asiata maybe as a short rushing touchdown. I like McKinnon as a talent. I just think the Giants' run defense between the 20s is going to be decent. It's probably going to be Asiata getting the goal line score.
And that's a good call. And we always know Asiata's good for 1-3 touchdown, 20 rushing yard game. So maybe this is the week. So that is the slate, guys. If you want to check out the full article and get the full breakdowns, go to dailyfantasycafe.com and check out the slate breakdown. If you like what we're doing here, give us a like and subscribe on our channel. And as always, if you want to hit us up on Twitter for some questions, we're there as well with our Twitter handles. So thanks for tuning in, and we will check you guys in week 5.